Hey, look what we have found. A big sound in a small town. Far away from the bright lights. They're making music every night. Discover what is all around. A big sound. A big sound. In a small town. Big sound, small town. A really big sound. Big sound, small town.
You're listening to Big Sound, Small Town with Sandy Carlton.
Hi, and welcome to Big Sound, Small Town. I'm your host, Sandy Carlton, and this is a podcast about the lives and stories of the musicians, writers, artists, and their associates that have their roots in the small towns and communities across America. If you like what you hear, tell somebody. Enjoy.
I'm Brinkley Issacs. Currently, right now, I'm playing with a band called Feeree and Medicine Crow, and we play quite a bit around Shelby and some other places not too far off, Hendersonville, Asheville. Pretty much a lot of vineyards. With the COVID thing, we've been doing a lot of outdoor stuff, but lately we're getting back into playing the indoor things, and we're just ready to get back after it.
Well, that's good. I saw you guys doing a lot of the vineyard type things. Those are pretty decent jobs.
Yeah, they really are, and most of these places are just really nice. They're family-owned businesses, and it's outdoor right now, so there's plenty of social distancing, and we've had really good turnouts, even in the fall. You know, with the kind of in the peak of the COVID, we were still doing some of them. They were more few and far between, but.
Didn't you guys play the ISIS on the inside?
We did. We played ISIS probably going on about 5 weeks ago now. That was Saturday night. That was great.
Yeah, that's a great venue. I played there. That's a great venue. You know,
it really was. And those are great people over there too. It's got a nice stage. They got their own in-house sound system. It's really good. But
and that was
we did pretty much all original stuff when we played there.
That was a distancing type thing too, wasn't it? I mean, even though
it was.
I mean,
I think their maximum capacity was probably about 80 people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the downside when you get to play right now.
Yeah,
the crowds aren't there.
It is.
You know, but outside of that, it's still a chance to play.
It's a chance to play.
That's right. And playing is better than not playing.
That's right. I don't care if we're playing in front of 3 people or none at all. It's still good just to be playing.
You know, when we started this, we started just to play the music.
That's right.
And so we're always happy when there's fans at all.
Yeah.
So we'd probably be doing this even if there was nobody.
Probably so.
I mean, it's more fun with the more people, the more fun it is.
It is
no
definitely.
doubt.
It's but even in playing in your bedroom is better than not playing at all.
I agree totally.
Yeah.
You always been a musician?
No, I would say it's probably a long story. If we want to go back to the time I was 5 years old, we can go there.
Yeah, let's go.
But I was living in Valdez at the time, and my dad was taking guitar lessons. My dad's Jack Issacs. They moved to Shelby, and I think it was around 1985. And Dad was he was the regional manager for BB&T at the time. But anyway, going back to Valdez, we moved a lot because Dad was into banking. They transferred him a lot. He was taking guitar lessons, and he'd bought a little dime store guitar. It was like a Stella. And as a matter of fact, I've still got that guitar right now.
That's too cool.
He was taking lessons from a guy. Well, the guy actually loaned him I think it was a Gibson L5 guitar and a Gibson amplifier. And of course, I'd learned 2 chords on the Stella, skip to Maloo, which was a C to an F with one finger back at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I picked up that electric guitar down there. Dad had left it leaned up against the couch, and I started playing skip to Maloo on it. And I was like, at 5 years old, I was like, one of these days, I want to play an electric guitar. I love the acoustic too, but I was always driven more towards the electric. And later on, we moved to Murphy, North Carolina, and I came from a pretty musical family. I was telling you earlier that my dad, his uncles were Doc Watson. They were friends with Doc, and 2 of them were the ones that kind of encouraged Doc Watson into taking the music route that he ended up doing. Well, my dad, with all his family being musicians, my dad's got a great voice. He's a singer. He quit singing pretty much about 3 years ago. He's 85 years old, going on 86. But
Wow,
he's still,
that's good though that he got to sing that long.
I'll say this to this day, he can get out there and carry a tune. My sister's good. She's very talented too. She's a piano player and she sings a soprano. She doesn't play piano much anymore, but she's a great soprano. We grew up in Murphy, listening to John Denver, Neil Diamond, a lot of folk stuff. My sister was Elton John and Neil Diamond, Chicago, good stuff. And of course, I guess what got me into playing the electric guitar and having the huge interest for it was 1977 when my sister graduated from high school. One of my dad's good friends came up for the graduation, and he brought a Gibson Les Paul up there with him. It was a 1974 Deluxe. And he also, for my sister's graduation gift, he gave her the first Boston album, which had actually came out in 1976. And then also gave her a Yamaha, I think it was a FG350 acoustic guitar. Well, my sister, she got pretty good at the acoustic guitar. She didn't really get too good at listening to the Boston album, so I took it over. And we had an old Fisher 800C stereo. It was an old tube-type high-fidelity system in our den. And when Cheryl Greer, my dad's buddy, brought the electric that time when my sister was graduating, well, the only thing we had to plug it into was that old stereo. So we took the guitar and had a splitter cable and plugged it into the auxiliary input of the stereo. But that was my first time ever even playing electric guitar. And as time went on and passed, I didn't have electric guitar for a long time, but then when we moved back to Valdez, I think that was in 77. I was right around 15 years old. I was in the 9th grade. I had some friends of mine that had a rock band. Robert Rector, my old high school buddy, and actually my old roommate in college, he was really good rhythm guitar player, and his dad had bought him a nice Gibson amp. He had a Les Paul. Later on, he had the first Marshall stack ever in Burke County, probably, as far as a 100-watt Marshall. So Robert was a big influence on me as far as, man, I want to be like Robert and do this. And so anyway, I ended up playing in the band myself with sometimes Robert and I played together, but ended up, got my first electric guitar when I was 15 or 16. Dad bought it for me. It was a little Army Navy guitar. And Dad just thought I was going to probably get bored with it, put it down. Yeah. But I didn't. Stuck with it. Dad ended up buying me the 1974 Les Paul from his buddy, Cheryl, that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Cheryl's hands were getting bad, got to where he wasn't playing anymore. So I ended up with that Les Paul, which I still have to this day, and it's still my primary electric guitar, though.
I saw that guitar,
Yeah. And in high school, I played in a couple bands there. A couple guys from over in Drexel. I went to East Burke High School over in Burke County. A lot of good musicians from that area.
Oh, yeah, there are a lot of good musicians from that area.
That's right. And then went on to NC State. Of course, I didn't play in a couple bands there, but in college, that's when I really started playing lead guitar. Was then. I was heavily influenced by Boston and Van Halen and Randy Rhoads, who was Ozzy Osbourne's guitar player. And that was probably what made me want to be a lead guitar player.
Did you have Marshalls by then?
First Marshall I got, yes I did. I had a 1979 Marshall that I got in 1979 at high school. And I remember I paid $505 for the head. It was the master volume version. I ordered it from a place in Atlanta, right off of Interstate 85. It was called Metro Music. I'll never forget there. I didn't have to pay tax on it, so I remember it was $505 even. And we had it shipped to the high school there. Where I went. My mother worked at the high school. So I'll never forget when that thing came. Seems like it was in the spring of '79. And Scott Oliver, my buddy that I was playing with the band with at the time in high school, we were all excited.
I'm sure you were.
This box.
Oh, yeah.
We go back there in the band room and we take it out of the box and we're moving it. And we hear this rattling sound going on. Oh gosh, something's messed up bad. Took the back off of it. It was just a tube shield off. Never forget, we took it, cranked it up to an old PV cabinet in there, and we turned it up on about 7. It was just blowing the windows out in the band room. But that was my first Marshall experience. But anyway, talking about amplifiers, as we were talking about earlier, I've always been into tone more than I am as far as like being a great guitar player. And I definitely don't consider myself that good of a guitar player, but I really enjoy working with tone and trying to modify amps and get them to sound the way I want to.
Well, I will have to say that was one of the first things. The first time I saw you play, I thought, oh, gee, man, what a tone.
Thank you.
I'd kill for that tone. And since then, I've seen you with different combinations of equipment, but the tone has been there the whole time.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope that makes up for some of my.
Oh, your guitar playing's great too, man. I wasn't even going there, but tone is harder to achieve actually than the ability to play well.
It is. I guess the way I got into that was every time you would change the tubes in a tube amplifier, you're paying probably for the tubes. You're paying $100 for a 100-watt Marshall for all 7 tubes.
Yeah, probably.
Then you got to pay a bench charge of about $35 or $40 to get it biased. So my uncle, my dad's brother, he was really into electronics. He told me, he says, well, you can do that yourself. And he explained to me how to do it. He gave me the old RCA tube manual, and I learned how to do that myself. I bought my first piece of equipment was a bias probe, and I just started. That's what got me into it, is the fact that I could actually change my tubes out and bias my amp myself, and I started going farther and farther.
Right. Well, how'd you keep from getting electrocuted during that time? Sammy Johns.
No, I did not keep from getting electrocuted. Oh. Well, I would say that I never got electrocuted, but I have been shocked many times.
Yeah.
But you really have to keep your one hand behind your back.
You do.
Because even when the worst shock I ever got was when the amp was off. It was on the bogan. Those capacitors can store a lot of electricity, and I got hit hard.
Yeah, it's for people that don't know, Sammy Johns is a guy that's actually from Gastonia, had a huge hit, and he worked on his own amp. And
I heard that.
It killed him.
That's what I heard. You might have been the one that told me that.
I could have
been. I never
been.
knew it until recently.
Yeah, that's and I've tinkered too with amps, and over the years, and after that, my perspective got a little different. It's like, well, maybe I don't know enough of what I'm doing. Like he didn't.
Well, it's a matter of, it's like a lot of things. I bought a lot of books from these guys that have done it for years. And, one of them even started out with basic chemistry with electron flow and stuff.
Right.
And you go from there and you just start messing with it. It's just kind of like tearing down an automotive engine and rebuilding it.
Yeah, kind of.
Just like I was telling you earlier, modifying an amp and trying to get a tone that you're hearing in your head is a little bit like cooking. you know, you got something that you got a recipe that you're trying out, and you think you taste it, and well, it needs a little more salt, a little more pepper, or whatever. An amplifier the same way. You'll change out a capacitor, maybe go up or down the value, change a resistor out, maybe to give you a little more gain in the mid range or whatever, and you kind of do it until you're kind of getting this what you're hearing in your head is kind of close. So it's a matter of little alligator clips over resistors and capacitors and stuff, and you know, before you actually solder it in, you can do this, you know, and kind of get your tone. One of my best friends is Scott Splone, he is the owner, and he builds Splone amplifiers,
right.
which is, he's got his own company over here in Dallas. It's called Splone Amplification. But
Yep.
I learned a lot
great amps too. Those are great.
very
amps.
good amps.
Yeah.
They're built like a tank, and they sound wonderful. His are more the Van Halen Brown sound, you know, but they're really good amps. And Scott, I learned a lot from him about this. Him being one of my best friends, and he and I both being huge Van Halen fans, you know, we were always going for that sound.
Yeah, it's a great sound.
It is.
I mean, it is. If you're looking for that sound, you can only get it just a couple of ways.
There is a couple of ways. It starts with the guitar and the pickups.
Yep.
And then it goes, the amplifier, you've got to have a 100-watt Marshall.
Yep.
You have to dial the voltage down to 90 volts. And you have to have some sort of a graphic equalizer between your guitar and that amplifier.
Oh, yeah, I like the fact. Yeah, let's go to that too.
Sure.
Some listeners I know will love this. So I see you playing at Dragonfly with a huge amp. So tell them how you do that.
Most of the time lately, I've been using an old 1969 100-watt Super Lead. I bought the thing for $400, believe it or not, probably 15 years ago before everything started going through the roof. But the way I get my sound, it's actually called reamplifying. And what I'm doing is I'm running through it like I was talking about a minute ago. I've got, most of the time I'm playing like a Super Strat style guitar or a Les Paul with either a Duncan Custom pickup in it or a Duncan Custom. I'm going through my pedal board, my front end pedal board, the one between my guitar and the amp, has a phase shifter, a wah pedal, a flanger. It does have like a Tube Screamer overdrive in it, but I don't use it near as much anymore. Okay, and then I'm going from there over into, I don't think I left out any of my effects. Oh yeah, compressor. Going from there straight into the amplifier. The amplifier is dimed out on 10, at least the treble channel is. I'm bridging both channels. I'm going into the treble channel and what they call daisy chaining out of the bass channel on the treble into the bass channel of the amp, turning the bass channel up on about 1 o'clock, which is about 6. Turn the amp wide open, but between the amp and the speaker cabinet is a Tom Schultz power soak.
Yep.
What that does, it allows you to turn your amp wide open. You get that tone of a dimed out Marshall, but yet your ears aren't bleeding. So you're able to, it acts as an attenuator between the amplifier head and the speaker cabinet. So you can, it's like a volume control. Okay, out of that, to get my effects like the delay and the chorus, the time delay stuff, you don't want those effects in front of your amp because they get real mussed up and distorted. So after I'm in between the speaker cabinet and the head, I have what's called a Palmer box, which is, it basically steals some signal off of the amplifier head, converts it to like a line level signal. It also has a built-in speaker simulator, so you can actually modify your tone. But I'm going out of that into split stereo, into my all my time delay effects, my chorus pedal, my delays. I've got several different delays, and the last thing it goes through is an eventide time factor, which splits the signal stereo, and you get a ping pong slapback echo on the left and the right. Okay, out of that, this is where you're getting your sound. You're going out of that time factor stereo into a stereo power amp, and that power amp goes into 2 separate left and right speaker cabinets. So you've basically got, you're reamping. You're getting the signal off of your amplifier head, and you're reamplifying it through a process signal into a power amp, almost like you're running into a PA, but all of your wet signal is coming out of the reamp. Your left and right is wet. all the middle signal is pretty dry. So it's like what the 80s guys called it, a dry, wet sound. But I mean, for somebody that doesn't care about guitar amplifiers, let's just go to the next thing.
I've had a lot of people ask about that. With you, it's like, how does he do that?
That's great that people are interested in that.
Well, they're guitar. I'll back that up. They're not really listeners. They're guitar players.
Right.
Ask that. I mean, the sweet little girl sitting there just loving your playing could care less. But
right.
But there's a guitar player sitting on this. How's he do that? I mean, when you guys came up here, it was like, how do you do that? So
going back to up here, that's been over a year ago.
Yeah, I guess it has.
Yeah, because it was right before all the COVID stuff.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
This is a funny story. Luke Edwards, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. The amplifier that I used in there when we did that, actually, it was a Frankenstein amp. Luke Edwards, gosh, it's been 12 or 13 years ago. He gave me this little small PA amplifier that he'd gotten in some church or a yard sale or something.
Yeah, he's always.
It was a little old 15 watt. It was made by Precision Electronics. Luke gave me that. I think he traded me that for doing some work on one of his amps or something. Anyway, but Luke probably didn't know this, but the amp that I used in there, basically, it's the same chassis that was that amplifier that Luke gave me, but the transformers are all different.
Oh, yeah.
Power transformer is out of an old Pilot stereo system, and the output transformer was out of an old Vox AC-15. Uh-huh. So it's the design of the amp is exactly, the schematic is patterned exactly after an old 1962 Vox AC-15 minus the tremolo and all that.
Well, it did kind of have that sound.
It's got a great tone.
Yeah, I mean, I was really curious then, because I was like, I don't really know what that is. And I don't get. I mean, if it's basic standard stuff with a little bit of modification, I pretty much know what's happening. But you came in and kind of just totally baffled me with that.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad that you enjoyed that tone.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite amps to play through, to get like a semi-clean Class A low volume sound.
Yeah, Chris Rogers, a buddy of mine. He uses a lot of boards out of organs.
Oh yeah.
Out of like Hammonds and stuff that, I didn't even realize that you could do that.
Yeah, those old tag boards that come out of those things are very easy to do your Frankenstein projects with. They're really solder friendly, and whereas like a printed circuit board, if you're going to do anything with a printed circuit board, you got to take the whole board and get underneath it.
Yeah. That part I understand a little better than. You're the two guys that understand that around here.
Yeah. Chris is really good at what he does too.
Yeah, he's good at. He's building one now. So,
is he?
Yeah, he's always building.
He's got some nice stuff.
Something. Yeah, he does have some nice stuff. I hate to go over there because I won't leave because I'll play all his stuff.
Yeah.
So, how'd you ever even get hooked up with Chris?
Well, it's kind of strange. I guess it's been a little over 20 years ago. Chris and Brad Horde they were playing together. They were at a band, and at the same time, they were also like doing some kind of stuff for like movie soundtracks and stuff like that. Well, Tony Cook.
I know Tony.
Tony?
Yeah,
well,
I know
Tony
Tony.
Tony and I met back in 1986, not long after my mother and dad moved here. And Tony and I played together quite a bit. Ended up, Tony was a house band player, so but as far as putting together the studio over at the Chicken House, Tony and I both. Tony had a lot more vested interest than I did, of course, since it was there. But he and I kind of both played together a lot and tinkered and recorded a lot of stuff in that studio. Well, Chris and Brad and them came in there and recorded. That's how I really met Chris was then. And I played with Brad and Steve Johnson probably about 17 or 18 years ago in a little band there for a brief period. But that's how I got to know Chris. And actually, I had not seen him in forever. And then I guess it was 3.5 years ago when he was playing at Newgrass that he asked me if I might be interested in coming over there. At that time, it was just, they didn't even have a drummer. It was just him playing the flutes, and they had Pedro playing acoustic, and it was just kind of like him, myself. Well, then we ended up just one step at a time. Joe Hinesley played drums there for a while. And
Joe, yeah.
And then now it's Eric, and then Mike Clapperud on the bass.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, it's a good band, good players.
Of course, Pedro's still Chris and Pedro and myself.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's been really interesting. You know, at first I was like, oh, I don't know about this, but
It's different. I mean,
It is different.
It's I think Chris always gets mad at me, but you know, because, and I'm sure everybody does this to him, it's not a far variant from Jethro Tull.
in a way it is,
You know?
especially with the flute stuff,
Yeah.
especially.
I mean, it does give it that,
Yeah.
which is a compliment. I don't know why he doesn't think so, but Jethro Tull, really great band.
They really are.
You know?
That was my first cousin, Freddie Issacs. He passed away several years ago, but he named his son Ian after, is it Ian Anderson?
Ian Anderson, yeah.
But our music that we play, the original stuff, is kind of a classic Southern psychedelic in a way.
Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's good stuff. Your recorded projects are good. You know, it's good stuff.
Thank you.
That's work to be proud of, no doubt.
We appreciate that.
Because, well, everybody knows that, you know, there's so much you have to play to work that is not your own work, and it's a whole total different thing when you do your own and it turns out good.
Right.
I mean, doing a rendition of something that somebody's done before, you got something to judge by anyway.
That's right.
But when it's what you created, you know, you've created it. There's nothing to judge it by. You know, so.
I know, and it's sometimes the end result's not what you really expected
True.
to be right at the first of it. You know?
True, yeah, that's
kind of
true.
how it is with us, I think.
Yeah, that's, you know, Chris had told me he recorded at a guy's studio I know in Lincoln there for a while too, and come to find out we crossed paths before I ever met him here through music, you know. So
Right.
it's So are you playing with anybody else these days?
Not really. You know, a couple years ago, I was trying to do I was playing with Richard Putnam and
Sure.
Rodney Bridges and those guys at Spring Street. But after Rodney passed away, you know, they pretty much, I don't know if they've played any or not, but I play in church most of the times, at least every other Sunday, music for the 11 o'clock service over at Elizabeth Church.
That's a good thing, too.
And, but pretty much other than that, I've not really played with anybody. I'd say maybe a year and a half ago, I played with the Howell Brothers, which is Deja Vu and Wade.
Yeah. I know those guys.
Basically sat in with them over here at Dragonfly.
Yeah, that's like I probably Richard might still play some off and on with those guys. You know, Richard's a fine musician too.
Oh wow! Talking about Richard Putnam.
Yes,
Richard is just absolutely insane. I
He
should
is.
have mentioned him more. We were talking about Pyramid Recording Studios. That's how I met Richard. I guess this was in the maybe late '80s, early '90s. But Richard, he came over there to do a couple jingles for some commercials. And
yeah,
I was just blown away by him. And then he and I ended up, whenever Stephen Furtick was putting together the band over at Christ Covenant Church, then Stephen asked me who I thought the best keyboard player was around here. And I told him, I said, your best keyboard player around Cleveland County is Richard Putnam.
it is. I mean,
And
he's also he's on the wall down here. We're in the Earl Scruggs Center, and he is on the wall down there.
I've never seen that, and I want to check that out.
Which I'll show it to you when we go. But you know, he had an early recording career here in Shelby too.
Yeah.
So which was really cool.
Yeah, Richard's Richard's very humble.
He is.
He doesn't brag or anything like that, but he's got a resume a mile long.
Oh, he does.
Yeah.
He does good work over at his studio
He
too.
really does.
Plus, he has David Johnson over there.
That's right.
And that's a story in itself.
Yeah, when we played with Furtick, we had a really good band over there. When we did the live stuff, it was Richard Putnam, of course, on keyboards, and Rick Murray.
Yeah.
You know Rick?
Yeah, I
Rick
do.
usually played the drums on
Yep.
both the CDs. The first ones we did with Furtick were
Right.
with Elevation Church. It wasn't Elevation then, it was just Christ Covenant Church.
Right.
It was before Stephen started Elevation. But Stephen Furtick is a very talented musician. Everybody just knows him as being a pastor.
Right.
He's very talented.
Very
also.
talented musician
Yeah.
also.
Sure is.
So I'm sure that was. Well, I've done my share of praise work, and that's a harder genre of music than anybody ever wants to
Really
realize
is.
it is.
It's not about playing solos and stuff.
No,
it's
it's
more
not.
about adding atmosphere and feel.
It's a whole different. I also
Yeah.
played Southern gospel for a while, which is not even in the same.
It's totally different.
Totally different.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but it's. I mean, I know people that do that for a living, and they work a lot, and it's hard
Right.
work. You know,
It is.
it's
Very
actually
much.
harder than being in a regular band.
Right. A couple other musicians that are local around here that were with us over at Christ Covenant would be Josh Hamrick.
Yeah.
Josh was the bass player during those projects, and let's see, I was trying to think. Carl Carty.
Yeah, I know
Carl was involved in that. He had, I think, on the second CD, he had already moved to
Probably.
Nashville by then, but he came back.
That was a talented group of people there.
There was a lot of good ones, and the second one was a lot more highly produced. It was Integrity Music, and they came from Mobile, Alabama, I guess, to produce that one. But
Yeah, that's some good stuff.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, I think Randy played with Carl for a while too.
Randy did.
You know?
Yeah,
I
he
saw-
sure did.
So, you know, it's funny that neither one of us grew up here, but we played just about with all of the better musicians.
Small
that are-
world.
Small world it is.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you come here and I guess you wind up finding those guys somehow or another.
I know.
So it's
I feel very blessed to, I always wonder if my mother and dad had never moved to Shelby, if I'd have pursued the guitar as much as I have.
yeah. I mean,
But, I think that the spark was the fact that I did, and after I graduated from college, I didn't really live in Shelby. I lived in Greenville, South Carolina for a while, and I lived in Greensboro. Moved back to Greenville, South Carolina. Well, then when mother and dad got settled into their house, I got a job in Charlotte, and it was quicker to drive back and forth to Charlotte every day than it was to live in Charlotte off of Albemarle Road and drive to work. So I
agree.
moved back in with mother and dad and got hooked up with a lot of people around here and started playing music and meeting a lot of different ones.
I mean, you did hook up pretty fast.
Yeah, I did.
So
But I'm blessed by that, just the people that have been in my life, that I've been able to do stuff like that with.
well, yeah, and it says something about you as a person. You're able to find these people,
Right.
and work with them.
And they were able to find me too.
Yeah, and there's also more to being a musician that people don't realize than just being able to play. A lot of people get a lot of jobs because they're good people to work with. They're
Right.
dependable. They do the stuff they're supposed to do, which is not always the case with musicians.
That's right.
And that in itself says a lot. I mean, I try to tell the young musicians around, do the things you're supposed to do. Pay attention to the guys that's been around a little bit, knows a little bit. Show up. Don't be drunk.
Right.
I mean, because that's kind of the nature. It's easy to fall into bad habits in bands.
It is.
You have a lot of time on your hands.
Yes.
People don't realize that you wait more than, you sit up, but then there's a wait period, always has been,
That's true.
and that's trouble.
It's, the fact that I do have a full-time job, I think is probably, kept it. I guess that's why I humble myself before so many of these great musicians here around this area, because so many of these guys, it's all they do.
Yeah.
And I consider my blessed to be a mediocre guitar player,
Well,
but been still able to, to play with some of these people.
Well, and I kind of felt the same way. And there's a lot to be said for, particularly as you age, for having a job all these times instead of just playing music, because I know people that are going to be doing this until they die. And as you get older, it is harder to play music out for a living.
Since you said that, I'll say the same thing. I guess going back to the Marshall stacks and stuff, I still don't have any trouble up on stage playing, but it's getting harder and harder to move 600 pounds of gear in and out of your house and into the wherever you're playing at, out of the place you're playing at, and then back out of your truck when you get home. That's the worst part of it now. A lot of these guys, they're bringing a 12-pound Kemper.
Oh, I know, yeah.
Foot thing, and putting it on there and playing it right into the PA system, and that's it. And they can get 10,000 different sounds with that thing. A buddy of mine, on Facebook one day says, "Why do you need all those amplifiers when you can get 10,000 different sounds in this thing?" I said, "Well, why do I need one of those things when I got 10,000 amplifiers?"
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
Probably shouldn't have said that. I was kind of sarcastic.
Well, but but that's the truth. I'll have to admit that I moved from a huge Ampeg bass rig.
Oh, the SVT 300.
Yes, sir. To a Aguilar system, which it sounds as good. It took me a lot of research to find something that sounded close, but it's light.
It's still an amplifier too,
and it's still got a head and two speaker cabinets. But the speaker cabinets weigh 20 pounds.
I know.
So a piece. So the head used to weigh more than my speakers do now.
Yeah, the SVT 300 is what it was, 8-10 speakers in the cabinet.
Oh, yeah. It came with wheels, but that didn't make it any easier. The wheels didn't have to work.
Get the wheels off the ground.
No, and the wheels, after years of having it, they kind of quit working,
Right, yeah, they didn't turn as good.
No, but great amp, no doubt about it.
That's still pretty much the holy grail when it comes to the bass sound, especially for rock and roll, classic rock, whatever,
Yep. I loved it. It's probably as good a bass rig as you can find ever, but also as you get older, those things get harder and harder.
They get heavier and heavier.
They do.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was talking about with the Marshalls and everything, but it's just nothing like standing in front of one of those things and playing through it, though.
Oh, now that is...
As opposed to like plugging in a Kemper through a PA system, it doesn't feel the same.
No.
You're not going to get the harmonic sustain and the feedback or anything with the relationship between the guitar and a PA system that you're going to get between that guitar and a Marshall cabinet. It's just not going to happen.
I'm not even going to feel it the same.
That's right.
There's a feel of standing in front of it that is not the same as standing in front of the new light stuff I have.
It is very convenient stuff. The new and the technology is unreal.
And it's like with new guitars too. New guitars are fabulous.
They really are.
Sound for the most part as good as any of my vintage stuff.
They do.
And if I close my eyes, you could probably trick me.
Yeah.
But there again, also. We'll talk Les Pauls while we're here.
Yeah.
That Les Paul of yours is probably 14, 15 pounds?
12 and a half. The one I was, as a matter of fact, I think the 74, the one I was talking about earlier, the first one, I think that's the one I played back here that day.
I think it was.
Natural blonde finish on top, humbucker in the treble position of the old, what you call it, the mini humbucker in the neck.
Yeah.
That's the heaviest one I have. As a matter of fact, I think it weighs almost 12 and a half pounds.
Yeah,
the old sandwich body type.
Yeah.
I've got,
but
I think I have 5 Les Pauls, and that's the heaviest one out of all 5.
That'd be right, because then they go to, you can get them these days that are chambered.
Yeah.
That are half the weight.
That's right.
7 or 8 pounds.
Well, the lightest one I've got is a 93 Classic, 1960 Classic. It's the flame top.
Yeah.
And it's got the chambered body in it.
Right.
I think it weighs about close to 8.
Yeah, that's probably about right. And then,
great sound.
Oh,
got almost a bell tone to it with the hollow.
It's a different sound though
than
the other one though.
It is.
It's not a bad sound though. It's just a different sound.
That's right. It is.
But it's funny how they've cut those almost in half, and
I know.
It still sounds good. It's modern technology. It's
Yeah, and Les Paul's got a bad rap because of the weight of them.
Sure.
And they just, I don't care. I'll stand there and hold that 12 and a half pounder any day.
I played them for a long time too, and when you're young, they don't seem that heavy.
Yeah, they don't. What kind of Les Paul do you have, Sandy?
How many you want me to tell you about?
Okay. Well, You don't have to go into much detail. I'll let you make that call.
Well, I have a 51 gold top,
Oh, wow.
trapeze tailpiece with the soap bar pickups. It's not that heavy.
P90s?
Yeah. It's not that heavy though, really. I mean, not all things considered.
Well, it's been aired around for 70 years.
It
It hasn't
has.
been that heavy.
Yeah, it's not as heavy as some.
80 years.
Oh yeah, I got some 80.
Yeah.
I got some 80 ones that are kind of heavy. You know, I don't have as many Les Pauls anymore. You know, in my case, guitars pass through a lot. I mean, there's some I hold on to, but I also swap and sell them a lot.
Right.
So a lot of them I wish I still had. I sold Josh McSwain. You know Josh?
I do.
Plays in Parmalee. Mm-hmm. I sold him a 62 Strat that I'd like to had back. I thought I was through with Strats, and he was still a kid. I have no idea if he still has that guitar or not. But
Probably does.
I'd left a band and figured that Stratocaster was not something I needed to play anymore.
Right.
And I think a guy named Tim Wright brokered the deal. And actually, I think I really sold it to his dad, Bud, who I knew. Bud played in bands around here. And
Tim's dad?
no, Josh's dad.
Oh, Josh.
Yeah, Josh's dad.
Okay.
In fact, Randy used to play in a band with Josh's dad called Les Honk. But yeah, I kind of wish I still had that because it is everything that a Stratocaster is supposed to sound like, you know. But
I have a 79 Fender Strat that I got back when I was in school at NC State, and it's one of the ones that's got a really odd turquoise blue color to it.
no, really.
Back then, you know, being the Van Halen fanatic I was
Right.
at the time, I had to have a Floyd Rose in it.
Yeah,
to have a
yeah.
humbucker, so I took that thing and took a wood chisel and a router and
No,
made the
Sure.
put the humbucker in. Of course, I still have the guitar to this day, but it's it's been butchered up so much from that I don't know if it'd be worth that much or not.
well, that's the thing too. Over the years, I've had Stratocasters in every kind of combinations you can think of. I mean, from tons of switches and tons of different pickups and combinations.
You can definitely get a unique and a lot of different sounds with the Stratocaster.
You can. These days, probably my primary stuff is basically 60s era Telecasters. I still like
That's a
Telecasters a lot.
great unique tone there.
Oh, I went through a B bender phase and a G bender phase, which was a lot of fun, but it's not that they do anything that spectacular that you can't do on your own. It's just easier to do it.
Well, the only time I've ever had an experience with a B-bender, Randy Saxon's got one.
Oh, Randy had.
And
Yep.
I guess it was about 2 years ago. He had it down there in his shop, and that's the only time in my life
He's got
I've
a
ever
drop.
messed with one.
He's got a Scruggs tuner on that thing, or he used to have. He might have changed it back out, but he used to have a Scruggs tuner for his top E string.
Is that right? I think he still got
And
it.
he just drops it to D sometimes.
Yeah.
But
He's also got one guitar that tunes automatically.
yeah, he does.
I don't remember what. It seems like that's like a Gibson.
Plus, he has more SGs than anybody.
Oh
I
my
know.
goodness, that's his favorite.
He's the SG king, I
He
think.
is.
I played with him a long time, and I don't think I ever saw him all.
Yeah,
He's of course, that comes from working in music stores.
that's right.
You know, but he's got a ton.
He keeps them in a safe place.
Yeah, he does.
No pun intended.
Yeah, and I like SGs. I have too many guitars, probably also, and basses.
Mine's the opposite, I guess. I've got a lot of guitars, but I've got way too many amplifiers.
Well, I got too many amplifiers too, and sometimes we. That's been a bone of contention at my house a bit. too many amplifiers everywhere taking up room.
Yeah.
You know, and weird amplifiers too, checkmates and stuff like that too. Beside just,
Yeah.
you know, beside messes and Marshalls and tons of fenders. You know, I'm not as bad as Doug, but I got a fender of just about every type you could want.
I don't have a lot of Fender amps. The only one that I've got probably that would be, well, I do have a couple of Champs, but I've got an old Fender Tremolux.
Yeah, Tremolux.
That's
great.
probably from the early '60s. That I bought it from the old Ministry of Music over here, Mike McGee, that used to be at Elizabeth Church.
Yeah.
He that thing was pretty much in pieces. It didn't even have a speaker in the cabinet. It was all boogered up. Somebody tried to put a 12-inch speaker in it.
Right.
Had holes drilled in it in the back of it, stuff. But anyway, I made a trade with Mike McGee, who, by the way, Mike's a great musician himself.
He
And
is,
his son,
but
Matt McGee, is really good too. But he got it in a trade, but I made a speaker cabinet for his son, Matt, and I've still got that. That was 25 years ago probably. I've still got that amplifier.
Well, probably, if I have to be associated as a guitar player, I probably played as many jobs with Princeton in recent years, just
Great
because it fits most of the venues that you play anymore, and easier to haul than a Marshall or a AC30 or something. It's easier to haul than that.
Yeah. It's a mean 12 watts too.
It is.
I had one years ago, and I wish I'd never sold it.
Yeah, it's and then of course modern. You know, you move to a Swart.
Yeah, Swartz.
That's a pretty good amp. I like it a lot.
Yeah, Randy's got two of those.
Yeah, he's got two of those.
Yeah.
He's it's pretty good. Plus, I do baritone guitars too,
Oh yeah.
which are they're not so much fun if you're by yourself as they are if you play with somebody. It's just a whole different color of. You can't look at their hands though,
Right.
because it's tuned different. You know.
It is.
You know when
A
you're
longer scale on it.
longer scale. So I have to remember that. Like if I'm playing in a D, you're playing in a G. You know, and it can get confusing, particularly if you're moving back and forth between guitars. But
The only time I've ever played a baritone was Randy's got a Gibson.
he does got
I
a really
think it's
nice.
a Les Paul baritone, and he let me borrow that thing for a couple of weeks a few years back. And they really are fun.
Oh, they're fun. I mean,
You can't really play many happy songs with a
No.
baritone guitar, though. It's kind of, they're very, but that's what makes it kind of fun to play, is because it's just, they're so low.
they're low and kind of
Just
dark.
growly, dark, you know, it's fun.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I have an acoustic baritone too, and for some reason Kevin Bridges that I play in a band with always wants that thing, and I don't play. You know, you get a lot of guitars, you don't play a lot of them all the time.
Me neither. I get like kind of stuck on one, and I'll play it for several months, then I'll move to another one and go back and forth.
No, I'm bad too. I'm a slide player too, and I'm bad to have open tune guitars too.
Right.
You know, I mean, pretty much my go-to is a G, but I have them in E and you know D, but pretty much I do all my stuff in
Right.
G. You know, which
Well, you know, talking about open tunings, but about the only time I play acoustic now, I've got an old Takamine. It's a Steve Warner.
yeah, oh, that's a
And,
nice guitar though, really.
It is a great guitar. I bought it from a guy down in Bowling Springs. Gosh, it's been 25 years ago, I guess. But most of the time, the stuff that I write with that guitar is in alternative tuning.
Yeah.
It's not dad gad,
All right.
but it's instead of the GAD, it's GBD.
Oh, yeah.
That's the way it is. And I had it by mistake tuned like that.
Oh, really?
And I'd
You
written
like-
all this stuff thinking I was in dad gad. I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds pretty good. So anyway, it's I've just kind of stuck with it.
Well, I spent a lot of time doing. I played blues for a long time too, and I played a lot of resonator over the years, and it kind of rolled over to electric guitar.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done enough Stones, Black Crowes covers
Right.
to.
Well, talking about cover stuff, I guess that's why I'm not that great of a guitar player. The guys that can do cover tunes to me are some of the best guitar players out there. You have got to be good to play cover tunes.
Well, a lot of people don't play them right too. You realize
Well,
that
that's
too.
true.
The guy that plays with me, Danny Parker, I will tell you, if he learns a cover tune, he learns it correctly and just like it is. I have no time. I can improvise all day long, but I have
Me too.
very little. I don't know if it's patience or what to learn somebody else's solo note for note.
I'm the same way.
And
I mean, I was watching like JT Fitz the other night. JT's really
JT
good.
is great at
And
that.
He was doing the solo in that song "Limelight" by Rush, and he did not miss a note in it.
And can sing.
Yeah,
I mean,
can sing.
he can do that he's got Luke playing with him now.
Yeah.
But I've seen him do that stuff as a one guitar.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
down there. That was Saturday night. It was after we played down here at Mountain Brook, and I stopped by there when it was JT and Art and Luke, and I don't remember who the drummer was, but
Matheny, I think.
Art had a little episode with the defibrillator.
Pacemaker, defibrillator, yeah. Well, Art's a fine bass player too.
He is a great bass player.
His tones,
Those guys, all four of those guys are really talented.
they are. But JT is amazing.
He is.
He is probably as good as playing covers as anybody around.
He is.
I mean,
When he was 12 years old, he was going to Christ Covenant with his mother and dad at the time, and when he was 12 years old, he just gets up there on stage and plays my guitar and just plays a song that he'd written. I mean, the kid's he's just always he's got the drive, and he's not scared of anything.
No.
He can get up there, and I was just kind of intimidated by him when he was 12 years old.
He did the podcast, and I went to his house, and we sit there and played a little bit, and it's like, wow, he knows a lot of songs for a pretty young guy.
He did. He plays old to be so young.
He does.
Always
he really
has.
Does. His tones are what to be expected for his songs too. I mean, it's he's a talented.
He is.
Talented player. I'm glad he's kind of back in town.
Yeah, I am. I hate the circumstances. I understand it's
It's a bad way
family
to
health
come
issues.
back. But he's he's a talented player. And Art works well with him too, because Art is pretty good at playing cover stuff too.
He is.
I mean, he can play. I played with Art a long time. In fact, I played in a band that probably gave Art his first real paying jobs,
Right.
And he had just graduated from high school and was working for Doug, I think, at the time.
Yeah, he worked up at Apple Tree back in the early 90s, I guess, didn't he?
Yeah.
Late 80s and early 90s.
And when he came in, he was a kid, and I could not believe all the songs that he could play.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was good. I played with Art a lot too over the years.
Art, he years ago when he was working, gosh, I guess it was Mars back then, maybe over here in Charlotte. And
Yeah.
George Lynch is a guitar player for Doc, and that was, I think he was pretty much solo then, or maybe I think he had Lynch Mob, but Lynch, he gave 2 different clinics at that place, and George actually even remember my name being Brinkley. I guess it being a kind of a different name.
It is a
I can't
different
remember who
name,
it was,
yeah.
but the second time George came, Art was one of his musicians when he played up there and did his little presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, doggone, man. Art, when he's up there playing bass with George Lynch, man, I'm having to sit out there and watch this, because I envied that. I was like, man, Art, that's just great that you got an opportunity to play with somebody like him,
Well, Art's a quality musician.
He is that.
He's Art, but he's a quality musician. I will tell you that he's been one of my favorite bass players around here.
He is really good.
He he is.
There are a lot of good bass players around Cleveland County.
There are. You play with a good
Art's
one.
definitely one of the best.
You play with a good one now. Mike's good.
Mike is very good.
Yep.
He is, and he moves around with those fingers, old school, which is, I'd envy that guy. I can play a little bit of bass, but you have to use a pick. I'm not like.
I play a lot. I have to play a lot of bass these days, just because there's a lot of good guitar players, and it's a lot easier to work as a bass player.
That's right.
I mean, I can work. Plus, I play upright bass, so I can, I can find plenty of work to do.
Yeah.
Easier than it is guitars. I mean, I'm everybody's guitar player. I mean, everybody's got a guitar player about like I am.
Right.
So there's nothing to distinguish me. I'm probably a better slide player than most people are, but outside of that, you can find 100 of me around town.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm just playing slide within itself. That's hard to do. I've never gotten good at that.
Well, I lived in Boone for a while, and I was a caretaker at this camp, and it had lots of cabins on that thing, and I'd have my buddies stay out there too. And we were supposed to be learning bluegrass at the time, but we would get out there and crank our amps up and play Allman Brothers to the middle, because there's nobody around here, and we could crank our amps up, and we come out there to play bluegrass, and we'd be out there maybe an hour of tinkering. Next thing you know, there we are playing Allman Brothers and
Good stuff.
it was fun. And I actually had a guy who twice in my life I had friends who taught me about slide. A black guy, Obie Dowell, taught me how to play harmonica right, not how to play cross harp and how to play slide. And then I played with a guy in Boone who was just such a fine slide player. And it's I was kind of lucky there. Sometimes you're lucky enough to have somebody to help you along.
Do you like the glass or the brass, or which one?
Depends on which I'm playing.
Right.
I like glass on Stratocasters. I like glass on SGs. I like a good old metal one on a Les Paul.
I bet you.
It just just grabs a little
Right.
better, And on resonators, I like brass or steel, I like them better too on that. It just kind of, if I'm going to rock, yeah, man, I really like a good old heavy metal one.
Right.
If it's something other, if I'm playing like Little Feet, then I'd rather play like glass on a Stratocaster.
Do you use much overdrive when you play your slide stuff?
I do. I really do. These days, I'm a real fan of, it would be actually, I use Wampler Timeless. Mm-hmm. That is such a fine tone pedal for most of that. It's just enough, it's a clone type pedal.
Mm-hmm.
And I really,
you got one of those old clones around, you can get your pretty much name your price for that thing nowadays.
I'd love to have one.
I would too.
But this does a pretty good job of replicating it, and it fits my pedal board good. So, but yeah, I mean, it's different these days too, and really with any amp. And that to kind of decide like what I'm playing and where, but I do like to turn them up. I'll just tell you, I like to turn them up.
I do too.
It's
I'm fortunate to live 600 feet from any neighbors, so.
Well, I get yelled at a lot at my house for turning amps up too much. Yeah, I mean, I like 8 or above. I mean.
Oh yeah.
I can live with 8 on any amp, just about. But I'm not happy below 8.
Right.
So at home,
a good number.
I choose an 8 at home a lot. On a small, even a Princeton, probably a Champ at home, and it's probably still too loud. I might even push that to 10. I don't know, but
You just use the standard 6-inch speaker that's in the Champ, or do you
Yeah.
replace it?
yeah, I mean, I've replaced them before, but Champs are great for home. Well, actually, we used a Champ in recording studio not too long ago because you can turn it up. But I'd rather use a Princeton.
Yeah. That's funny. That when I was in college, I did have my 50-watt Marshall up there, but a lot of times I had a suite mate that lived underneath me on the 4th floor in the dorm, and he had a Fender Champ, and he let me borrow it for a while, and I would take an old, I think it was an old MXR Distortion Plus, and crank it up between the guitar, and I'd take the Fender Champ and turn it backwards, facing into the refrigerator in our dorm room, and turn it wide open in there, and that was our way of attenuating a little bit.
Oh, I mean, you can do that.
It was still loud, you know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm old school. I like my amps loud.
Well, that's where you get your tone.
It is.
It's not just the idea of it being loud.
No,
it's the idea of overdriving the amplifier to where the power tubes are saturating the output transformer.
Yeah,
and that's where
great.
you get the thick,
It
sustain,
is, it
the
is.
sweet distortion and the tone.
You ever seen Derek Trucks play?
You know, I do not think I've ever seen him live. I've just seen him, of course, on Access TV a lot and things like that.
I mean,
He's really good.
he is good. His tone is good, and
Very
he uses nothing. I mean,
Yeah. He's
but
just straight plug and play.
he is, but he does have good amps that he does crank. I mean, there's no pussyfooting around.
No, there's not.
He cranks his amps.
Yeah, he
you know.
does.
And of course, I'm sure all his amps have been somewhat hot rodded or customized.
Especially with the Marshall, though, if you want to get the Marshall sound, I mean, you've got to crank.
You got to
that
crank
thing.
it. I
You
mean,
have to.
Oh, and I never could. That always bothers me too, is to have an amp that I know what it sounds like when it's turned up. To have to, and power soaks always work good,
Right.
For that. But
Yeah.
it haunts me about amps if you can't turn them up.
It does, and it's just so restricting. Another thing that I didn't mention is Marshall amps, especially. You got to have the right tubes in them.
Oh yeah.
The Marshalls back in the mid '70s on up through the early '80s, they were shipping them overseas. I think it was when Unicord was the distributor, and they were breaking the EL34 tubes in them. Well, what they would do is they started shipping them over to the United States, and then putting 6550 tubes in the power amps.
Right.
When they were in the power section, whenever they got over here, and my first '79 Marshall I was talking about, it did not have that Marshall sound.
Right.
And for years, to me it sounded like a beefed up Fender.
Right.
But then finally, back in the late, I guess it was '86 or '87, I bought it over here at Apple Tree. I got one of those Marshall 25th anniversary Jubilees that it had the EL34 tubes. And I took
All the
that,
difference in the
I
world.
was like, that's that British sound that we've always been trying to get. Van Halen, the Scorpions,
Right.
all these Boston, all these
Sure.
hard rock bands. And from then on, I figured that out.
You just
and
changed the tubes
Changed
out.
the tubes in every one of them. Now, Randy Saxon likes the 65.
He does. He does.
He likes that crunchy sound,
He does. He does.
But I just, that mid-range bark and that compression, that smooth sustain, to me, that's the EL34s. You got to have those in there if you want to get that.
Yeah, I mean that's a great sound. And that's something else probably that you and I can touch on that other people might miss is, it's all dependent on the sound that you want too.
It is.
I mean, amps, while somewhat similar, can be just totally so different.
They all have their own characteristics.
They do.
Especially Marshalls, because the tolerances in the parts were at 11%. So you might, where this is supposed to be a 100K resistor, it might be a 90K
Right.
resistor in one amp and a 110K in the other. Capacitor might be a 0.22 in this amp and be a 0.33 in the other.
Sure. And you don't know that. I mean,
No, you don't.
You don't know that.
But that's what gives it its different characteristics
It
a lot
is.
of times.
It is. And, also, if you want a Vox sound, you're not going to be happy with the Marshall sound.
No, you're not. Two totally different. Amps altogether.
Great amps, both of them. But there again, I think a lot of times people buy an amp thinking they're getting one tone, and then
That's right.
and then get a different tone than they thought totally.
Yeah.
Because, tone's a specific thing that a lot of people do not understand.
It is interesting that the AC 30 and the Marshall 100 watt. If you look at the circuit diagram, they're very, very close until you get to the phase inverter in the power section.
Really?
Because then you're going into what they call the Class A, whereas it's full current all the time, whereas the Marshalls are Class AB, which is push-pull circuitry. Class A, you've got a lot more chime and harmonics and bell-like tones, more compression. Marshall, you've got a lot more punch and a little more volume.
Yep.
But they actually, if you look at schematics, they're very similar.
But that's weird how that works.
It is weird.
And it makes there's a big difference in the tone because of that.
Huge difference.
I mean, they're both great amps. It just depends on the tone that you want.
Two totally different tones.
And that's another thing I've had to learn a hard lesson on over the years is sometimes an amp you love might not work for the music you're playing.
It might not.
And you love the amp, but it just, I've had that with, I had a Hofner bass that I loved. Yeah. I loved it, but it only works on certain things.
That's right.
If
you're going to play some Beatles and some stuff like that, it's great.
Yep, but other stuff, it just doesn't work. Short scale basses are a little bit that way.
That's right.
They'll work on stuff and be really good, but then they won't.
Yeah. Well, when I was playing with Richard's band Spring Street up here, Gaylord Brawley and Mike Black and Rodney and Randy Howell played in the band there for a while too. Great, they're all great musicians.
Yeah, Howell brothers were great.
Yeah, it was beach music and top 40 funk, old school funk. Marshall sound just don't. It's not going to get it on all those songs.
It don't.
Maybe if in some of the solos I can play that funky music, White Boy or something like that. But most of the time you're in that neck position pickup and you're wanting more of a clean jazzy type sound.
Yeah, which a Roland is great for.
That's right.
I mean,
sure is.
That's a perfect amp for that.
Perfect for it.
But
and actually, I used an ADA preamp a lot with them, going through a Mesa Boogie power amp, and the sound that I dialed up with
would be good
it was a MIDI preamp, was the Roland JC120 or the Fender Twin. Those were the two patches that I used.
And they're comparable amps
Very
too,
much.
and they're if you want a good clean sound, I'll take either one of them. I mean, you've been places with backline. That's another thing too that people don't understand too. Sometimes when you get a backline that you have no choice over, sometimes you're stuck too. I mean, it's like
you are.
It's like, oh yeah. I mean, a lot of times you get to specify, like in that case, I want a Roland or I want a, but if I'll take actually. Generally, if I would be pushed on anything just to get a clean sound, I would probably go for that just because they're easier to find than, say, the right Fender for that, because that's a good standard amp for clean sound. I mean, you can't really go wrong.
It's very good. I know a lot of the guys that use the Kempers that are, like Steve Sinnis that plays with Tim Clark Band, the vending company that we buy most of our stuff from, they send us on some pretty extravagant trips. And last one we were in Hawaii, not this past January, but a year and a half ago. And Tim Clark Band is like the house band. They go to these events with us, and they play at the usually one night a week they'll be playing. Steve Sinnis, the guitar player, plays through a Kemper now, but whenever they're going these long distances, they have backline companies that provide the amps, and he prefers with Kemper. He prefers a deluxe reverb.
Yeah, I like it.
And he said it's either that or the Roland JC120. Yeah.
I mean, I would take either one of them, particularly if I was running something like that through it.
Right.
Because there's some actually some of that stuff is pretty good if you run it through the right. If you can run it through the right cabinet.
Right, you're basically just providing a power amp for it, but you're adding some harmonics and some nice little tube sounds with it,
Yeah, and that would be either one of those would work really well. I know some people that use the Milkman stuff kind of the same way, but you talk about varying from cabinet to cabinet, it really does. I mean, in the right cabinet, it's pretty good sound. And it's just not, you know.
Yeah.
And reverb's a weird thing too.
It is.
You know, everybody has their reverb they like, I think. That's other effects, but reverb is a weird one. There's so many kinds, you know.
That's one of the ones that I've always liked the deep reverb. My favorite reverb and amplifier is the old Gibsons.
And mine's say 63 Fender, somewhere in that area.
Right.
Spring reverb.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm not a big reverb person.
Me neither. I'm a huge delay man.
Delay is good.
Yeah, I use it as an effect, you know, just to give you atmosphere and put you in a certain size place, but I also use it a lot like the Edge did, you know, with YouTube, where you're actually
that works good,
the one hand thing, you know.
Yeah, that's good, and that works really well for that.
It does.
But reverb for me, now maybe if I was a rockabilly guy, I'd probably be all
you gotta have it with that stuff.
Yeah,
you know,
and slap back reverb stuff. But for what I do,
same here.
You know, I can live with just about any reverb that's in the amp.
Right.
You know, tremolo though is another thing.
I like tremolo.
I like tremolo a lot.
I like that big square wave on it.
Oh man, the square wave's the best. But you know, it's there's a lot of ways to go, but you can mess tremolo up.
You really can.
Reverb, I mean, you can overdo reverb, but for the most part, if you played a while, you can't. But you can mess tremolo up.
You can, and the timing of the oscillation is really critical with the tempo of the music sometimes. And
it is, and you know what works by yourself, like you're working on a part for a song you're going to do. You know, then you get with the band, and it's like, oh, this is just not working.
I know,
but
it's hard to get that. I mean, you cannot. It's really hard to get a tremolo that's going to, or you can play it a long time during a song.
Right.
It's going to get off sync with the click track or whatever.
But if you can nail it, it's great sound.
Oh, it is.
You know,
it is
when you can nail that down.
Yeah.
And if it's in a song and it's right, that song will never be right without it.
I know.
But
well, it's like, you know, Crimson and Clover. They set the whole tempo of the song based on that.
Yeah.
The oscillation of that tremolo.
Yeah.
That's what you'd have to do.
It would. I mean, and that works so well in that. You know,
that's right.
That's a prime example. I didn't even think about it, but that's a prime example of tremolo done right.
It is. I understand that. I mean, I don't know if this is right. Or somebody told me that they recorded that part of the song first and then built the whole song tempo-wise around that.
Well, I mean, if you're going to use tremolo right, probably you would have to do that, really.
Yeah, you would have to.
Because it would be hard to match it up. It's hard to match tremolo.
It is. That's
one of those things that most people play a long time and don't realize. They'll put their tremolo on, and then at some point, I'm sure they have to realize in the song, it's like, boy, this got wonky fast, you know?
Yeah, it's like getting off with a click track or something.
It is. It is. Oh, yeah. Click tracks are another thing. Samples are too.
Yes.
I've done shows with people that used them, and you know, if you hesitate or break your concentration, you know you've gotten off. You know.
Yeah, it's. I mean, some of the live stuff that we did. I know Richard and I played when we played with Matt McGee and Dina Spangler and Keith Latham. We had a little band and we played. We opened up for a new song over at Gardner Webb, and you know, just that was a huge factor then. You know.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, there's a lot you can do with that.
Yeah.
You just. I saw Johnny Van Zant run almost a whole show that way, and he got off, you know, and he struggled to get himself back.
It's a nightmare, and the way we did it, we had in-ears.
Yeah.
So you're hearing what you hear in your ears, the people aren't out there.
Right.
They're not hearing it. You'll even hear 1, 2, 3
Right.
chorus in there,
Yeah.
along with the tracks and everything that's
Right.
going on with it, and there's a click track. So, but if you don't have your in-ears turned up
Oh, I
where you
agree.
can hear that, you can possibly create a nightmare.
Oh, you can. I mean,
Yes.
I've been a part of those nightmares, and that's not fun.
I've been lucky so far when it comes to like live stuff, but I've not done it enough to where there's not been that much of a margin error like you have.
That's also like harmonies. If I can sing harmony all day long, if I can hear, but if I can't, you know how it is.
Yeah, if you can't hear it,
if you can't hear, there's no telling where
hard.
I'm at. It's there's some people that can do it all the way. Kevin Bridges that I play with, he could sing harmony to a lawnmower
is that right?
and not even but barely hear it. Me, if I can't hear, I'm all over the place.
Yeah, I've heard he's pretty good.
Yeah, he's good. He's good at that. I've actually been lucky to play with a lot of good. That's another thing I've been blessed. A lot of good harmony singers have taught me how to sing mediocre harmony for myself.
I do it a little bit, but I found myself to be just a hair flat. As good as my pitch is, I still sometimes, and I think it's a matter of maybe not hearing myself or hearing myself too loud in my head.
Yeah, if
know.
if it's monitors have to be right for me if I'm singing harmony.
I know Eric in our band, and
Eric does a
Pedro,
pretty good job,
he
too.
does really good,
Yeah.
and he's good singing lead. But Chris and Pedro and Eric, they've always been pretty good, but they've really gotten better and better as we've gone on.
It helps to. I tell you who does a really good job of harmony singing around here too is Scott Moss and
Scott, yeah, he's
and
good.
Scott and Tommy
Yeah.
and Brian Edmondson.
Right.
They
Yeah.
sing good harmony together, but Brian taught all them.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian is one of the better harmony singers around, which is a gift too.
He is.
I mean,
Well,
harmony
he and
singing,
Scott do good together.
They do.
Scott's a talented musician too.
Scott is, and he came late to music.
He did.
I mean,
Yeah, he's a late bloomer.
yeah. I mean, he's got a good voice though.
He does.
He's one of the better singers around.
Yeah.
So, Brink, I appreciate you taking the time to come do this.
Hey, Sandy, thank you. It's
Man,
been a pleasure, and
This is good stuff,
thank you. I've really I've enjoyed this.
This has been fun, man.
I mean, it's I know I just sit here and ramble more than I do anything, but
Well, that's the thing about this is a show really about musicians, but it's also for musicians. I mean, there's a lot of musicians that listen. There's a lot of people. I got lucky with this kind of in the pandemic that people had time to listen, and people like to hear musician stories, but really, really, a lot of musicians listen, and musicians appreciate what we talk about today.
I hope so.
There'll be a girl somewhere that listens
She's
to
gonna-
all of them. She's going to turn it off.
Turn everything off right off the bat.
Yeah.
I
But
appreciate the opportunity, Sandy.
I appreciate you taking the time. You're a busy man. Thank you.
Thank you.